Welcome everybody to another episode of AHB TV. I am your host, Omar Fuentes, the President and CEO of Accelerated Health Benefits, where we are changing the landscape of how healthcare is delivered. And today I'm joined by an extraordinary gentleman, Patrick Moraites. And Patrick, if you can go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody and tell them how wonderful you are.
Man, extraordinary.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever had an opening like that before. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for having me on today. This is super exciting. I love what you're doing here from a content creation standpoint. You've had some phenomenal guests. So really humbled to be a part of what you're building and what you're sharing. So thank you. Looking forward to having a fun conversation.
Yeah, man, it's going to be a fun conversation. So you are the partner for Access Group, correct?
Yes, sir.
So just tell us real quickly about Access Group then.
Yeah, Access Group is one of our companies and our core company. We are a managing general agency, so an MGA, so a term that you're probably familiar with from your world. Mm-hmm. So we're an MGA for professional employer organizations, or PEOs. So we represent a little over 100 PEOs across the country.
Nice. And you've been doing that for a good amount of time now, right?
Yeah. So the timing of everything is pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. We just celebrated 13 years in business, March 21st, I believe.
Wow. So in March.
Yeah,
man, right in the middle of all this mess.
Right in the middle of all this stuff. So yeah, 13 years.
So what do you, go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, what do you kind of attribute to, because 13 years, that's a good amount of time, sure, right, for having a business. I'm sure there's a ton of ups and downs, but kind of what do you attribute the lasting success that you've had so far in these past 13 years?
Just being nimble. I think in any business, being able to, it's just how you react to changes in the environment. You know, what we do today is not what we sought out to do when we started the company.
That's awesome.
So in 2007, we were a commercial brokerage for lending. So we were working with companies with lines of credit or equipment financing or financing of buildings. Well, that was right before the whole market crashed. So we had to reinvent ourselves, and we constantly have reinvented ourselves over and over again in order to sustain and stay in business over the years.
That's awesome, man. I think that's actually a pretty cool story. So you hit on a couple of things that I want to touch on. Before we do that, though, just explain to everybody out there who may not have a clear understanding of a PEO, what it does and the benefits.
Sure. Yeah. So the acronym, is Professional Employer Organization, PEO. It really isn't descriptive of what's taking place, the relationship between the business owner and the vendor, the PEO. I lean towards co-employer is a term that I like to use. Another industry term that people may be familiar with is employee leasing, or staff leasing is another term. But essentially, the dynamic and the way it works is the business owner is known as the worksite employer, and the PEO is known as the administrative employer. Mm-hmm. So as the worksite employer, hiring, firing, managing, training, day-to-day activities, that all still stays on their plate, right?
Okay.
The PEO has no interest in getting involved with telling a business how to run their business or how to operate their business. If they wanted to own a restaurant or a hotel, well, they probably wouldn't today, but they would be in that business. They're in the administrative business. So they administer all those back office burdens that, when you and your partner sat down and ultimately how we kind of fell into this business, when we sat down, it was one of the things you contemplate, like, you don't want to do payroll,
Right.
you don't want to handle workers' comp and all those sorts of things that come with business. You want to focus in on, whether it be your car wash or your landscaping business or your staffing company or whatever it is, whatever widget you got into business to sell,
Right.
that's what you want to focus in on. Well, the PEO handles the processing of payroll, the administration of the workers' comp, providing HR support, providing legal support when needed. They have partnerships with organizations like yours where they can partner with the administration of the employee benefits,
Right.
and partner in that way. So it's a number of different things that a PEO looks to absorb and offload for that business owner so they can focus in on their core business.
So there's a lot there, but I think ultimately what you're saying is that you guys essentially help. I like the concept because of the way that you even described it of co-employer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So actually being a partner with that employer on some of the other components that are essentially distracting them from their core, from their main purpose in business, right? So it sounds like you really save time and resources, right? And are there as their support on the administrative side of running a business and being an employer.
The compliance side,
Yeah,
often overlooked. And from a technology standpoint, the average company that uses a PEO across the board, there's 943 PEOs. So if you look at the whole landscape and you assess all of their clients, the average worksite employee count is 18 worksite employees. So from a technology upgrade, typically a company that size, you're not in a position to invest in a robust human resource information system, an HRIS system. Well, if you're using a PEO, you get to use theirs, and
Gotcha.
they put 7 figures plus into that type of technology. So you get the look and feel of being, a larger Fortune 500 type company when you're, smaller, because the technology system, you can house your policies, your procedures, your HR manual. The employees can check their PTO and all that stuff is readily available to them through technology. And if you don't have policies and procedures or you don't have a handbook, the PEO can create that for you. So it's that whole, especially when a lot of people there's 33 million people unemployed right now. So as some people are looking to alternatives, possibly starting their own business and getting into business for themselves as a way to earn a living, this is a good platform for them to have those foundational things in place, especially as they look to potentially recruit or hire people. You need to have some of those compliance type things to attract the right personnel.
Yeah, I think there's a big gap a lot of times with whether it's small business, medium-sized business, whatever it may be, of the compliance side. A lot of times it's kind of like an afterthought type of thing, because all of a sudden it's like, hey, we just had a mishap, or maybe someone questioned something or whatever, and then now they start thinking about compliance. I think the other I guess way to describe what you guys do is actually not only do you save time or resources, right? You actually are leveraging what's already out there to fill in their gaps, right? And ensure that they're being compliant and that they're actually, because as you and I both know, you have a company of 18, for many, that's actually a pretty decent size, but, being that small compared to everybody else, you can't afford not to have those gaps filled in, or at least being, paying attention to those.
And a company that size, they may not be able to afford, that labor attorney to draw up that paperwork. I mean, that in business, it's all about cash flow, and timing of that is everything. Because next thing you know, insurance premiums are due, and this, that, whatever. So it's always a cash flow game.
Yeah.
And this type of solution helps stabilize that, because your costs are fixed.
Yep.
Everything's administered on a per pay cycle basis. So if you're paying weekly, biweekly, or monthly, you have that stabilization of knowing what your cost is going to be, so you can have more predictable cash flow.
I like that. That's actually really, because I think in any business, cash flow is a big deal, but having it predicted now, being able to actually now map it out essentially,
Right.
to know what it is that you're actually spending and what you need to do and how you can execute. It kind of, what's the word? It just alleviates a lot of pressure for that small employer, right? Because then they can actually now plan for it, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right. I mean, so our relationship goes back many, many years. So, you coming from the commercial insurance world, from a workers' comp standpoint, let's just say a company has a huge year and they grow and they're feeling really good about their revenue and their projections. And then depending upon when that work comp renewal hits them and they're providing their payroll registers and the carrier says, hey, congratulations, you had a great year. Well, you used more premium than you paid for.
Yeah.
So now we need you to pay back premium. It's like, what?
Right.
So when you're looking at the money in the bank account, and all of a sudden you think you made less than what you actually did, because it's got to go for back premium, and now you got to make a deposit on new premium. And so all these little things smack you in the face when you own a business, because no one teaches you this. Can we curse on this show? No one teaches you this shit, Is this a family show? Is this a family show?
Listen, not for nothing. My kids have heard me drop some words before. I was working out I've made a gym in my garage. So I was working out in the garage, and I'm getting older. I know I look very young.
I got you beat, man. I got you beat with the gray.
No, the only reason why is because I've trimmed it. I've only trimmed it. But anyways, I was just saying that they heard me drop a couple of bombs just trying to work out a little bit. So I'm in a little bit more pain than I used to be. So you're okay. It still is a family show, right? But I think you brought up a lot of good points. So one of the questions I'm going to ask you before actually kind of backtracking a little bit is just real quickly is, so you're talking about various different, size and employers, right? And you can answer it a couple of different ways, right? Either at what point or at what size should an employer really start evaluating, obtaining services of an organization like Access Group or, like yours?
Yeah. So we insert ourselves as the middleman in the conduit between the client and the PEO, because there's 943. Each has a different appetite for risk. Each has a different type of specialization. They're located in different places across the country. Technology is different. So we help identify which one is best suited for that particular client. So to answer your direct question of what size, I think it really depends on where that business is at in their life cycle.
Mm-hmm.
If they're in construction and they're in Florida, the laws are different with respect to the laws in California or New York, because we have clients all over the country. So, once you hit a certain employee threshold, workers' comp may be required for your business. And if you're a newer business, a startup or in the first couple of years and you haven't had coverage before, you're not as attractive, right, to carriers. And that's not the case with PEOs. They love the new companies. They love the startups. They love companies that have had adverse claims history or claims frequency, because they can insert some risk management features to help get the company, back on track. So there's a variety of different reasons that someone would look at, a PEO, but we have companies that have one employee, and then we have clients that have 4,000.
Nice.
And the need is different. The one person, they need a certificate of insurance to do a construction job. The 4,000 person company, they want the technology. They want the labor attorney and HR support. They're growing so rapidly in so many states. They want to maintain compliance because they're crossing state lines and borders, and they want to make sure that they're checking all the boxes. it's the PEO's responsibility to handle and manage that. So it really depends on where that, the business is in their kind of life cycle.
So I guess it would just be fair to say that the fact is that at any stage of an organization, they should be taking a look at their needs, and at a minimum, having a conversation with someone like yours, organization like yours, to see, okay, where is it that, you guys can fit in, and where can you actually help? And like you said, depending on where that company's at, period, right, or their needs, you can essentially kind of customize a plan according to what they need.
Exactly, because the service of a PEO isn't exactly cheap. It can come as a cost savings depending upon what you're paying for workers' comp, but they're in business to make money too, just like anyone else. So there's administrative fees associated with such. So we'll evaluate this situation and circumstance, and we absolutely turn more business away than we close, because for where they're at, it's not the right solution right now. It absolutely is the story of Cinderella. It's the glass slipper has to fit. So the PEO may not be the best solution. However, maybe a payroll company may be the right solution. And maybe they are equipped to handle workers' comp on their own because they're in a clerical or technology code to where 20 cents per 100 in wages isn't that much money.
Right.
So it really depends on the situation and circumstance. But we'll advise them down the path of what's going to be best for them for now, and then long term, and then maintain a relationship to evaluate should things change. Maybe it's something to reconsider.
Yeah, and I think that's the reason why you're essentially calling yourself a solution versus just like a product or a specific offering. It's let's really try to figure out what that solution is. So speaking of that, a solution, you had said earlier at the very beginning that you guys started off at a different place, and it actually sounds like you guys started off at a completely different arena, right? So, so I just wanted to touch on that real quick, because I think that is a pretty cool story how you guys pivoted. It was a major pivot, it seemed like. So, again, just kind of setting that backdrop, in 2007, right before the market really took a huge dive, and a lot of people were impacted. You guys started in one area. You noticed that there was another area, and you guys decide to pivot. So walk me through that component real quick, because I also think that it's important for people to know so that they understand the type of organization Access Group really is.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. No, this is I mean, it's a fun story because it's more like a jive, and it's like a crossover spin move.
It was more than a pivot. It was a lot more than a pivot.
Yeah, it was during the Great Recession. It was, man, that was tough. So we were naturally comfortable reviewing P&Ls and financial statements. So we quickly changed form and became a cost containment and expense reduction company. So our value proposition was, let's sit down with a business owner. Let's take a look at their P&L. Let's look for areas of opportunity of savings, and let us go to work on your behalf. And then our value proposition during that time was, hey, you get to retain 100% of the savings. So there's no cost, no risk obligation to them. What we ended up doing was we ended up negotiating revenue or commission from the vendors on the backside, and they loved it because it was a new sale for them. They were losing business, so it was a win-win. So we could add revenue direct to the bottom line, and have an immediate impact on a business, and then get rewarded from the vendor on the back end. And what we built out was a residual annuity stream type of income for the life of the client relationship. At that point in time, I mean, we were a year in business, so talk about kissing every frog and just figuring it out. Like if we looked at a P&L and they're like, hey, our paper costs are through the roof. We're like, oh yeah, we've got vendors for that. And then we, figure it out. We did paper audits, fuel audits, commercial cleaning audits. I mean, you name it, we looked at it. And then as the country started to come out of the recession, that's when we put the microscope on our business and examined, okay, well, what are we good at? What do we enjoy doing? What has the highest profit margins with the shortest sales cycle? And then we narrowed our platform of what was probably 20 plus different things that we would look at and evaluate to 3. And the 3 ended up being merchant services, telecom and IT, and then we call these audits, and then a human capital audit. The reason we selected those 3 is, I don't know if maybe this has happened to you, but it hasn't never happened to us. A representative from Frontiers never called us up and wanted to take us to lunch and thank us for our business. So asking someone for their phone bills to evaluate them was never a challenging request. Most people were like, check your email, take a look. If you can save me money on my phone bill, take it. Same thing with merchant services. That's an unregulated industry that's been prone for corruption. So, taking a look at merchant service invoices and looking for areas of opportunities for savings there we never really got much pushback. And then lastly, the human capital audit, which we included, payroll, HR, workers' comp. We would evaluate, that entire spend. And then ultimately, in May of 2011, we May of 2012, we purchased the Axis Group. So they were a competitor, a much larger competitor, solely focused in on the PEO space. So we then, put all our eggs in that basket, stopped with the auditing of merchant services and IT services, and solely focused in on, wholesaling, PEO and employee leasing solutions.
So one is I appreciate you actually kind of breaking that down for me, because I think in general terms, like what you just described is something that I think is kind of near and dear to, I think, both of us, but we've had this conversation during this period of time where it's kind of like looking for the opportunity, right?
Sure.
And I think that, you literally took us from a point of, you start with an idea, you go after it, then all of a sudden you hit some obstacles and realize that you've got to, we'll call it pivot, but you guys made, you like shook and jived somewhere else, but the fact that you basically said, okay, what is it that we like? What are we good at? Those types of things, let's go after that. You put your heads down, you started going to work. Then once you knew, and I think that it's different for every employer or entrepreneur, right? At what point do you sit here and say, okay, now we've got to take a step back and evaluate, put ourselves under the microscope, and then make those appropriate changes? I just think that the steps that you took is pretty phenomenal, and I think a lot of people need a better understanding. And I would assume that going through that process and getting to the point where you were going to focus on PEO work, you learned a lot along the way, right?
Yes.
And even though you're focusing on a particular area, right, there's a lot of things that you learned, of even more so than you thought before. I don't know if you can kind of expound on that a little bit more, as far as kind of like what you learned and then how you applied it to what you're doing, what you guys are doing today.
Gosh, I mean, over the years we learned so much. I think even more so recently, just personally, just being more self-aware and recognizing to be patient.
Mm-hmm.
Omar, we literally, like, this is how naive I was. I mean, when we started the business, I was out knocking on doors, and then, you know, one of my business partners, he stayed back and obviously in the spare bedroom, and he was the one that was building the website and everything else, and, you know, putting the marketing materials together. And finally, you know, the website's live, and I would come, you know, I'd come home from being either at the Center Club or wherever, and it's like, hey, how many phone calls did we get? He's like, none. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean the phone didn't ring at all? Like, he's like, no. Like, go to the internet, you know, type it into Google. I'm like, it pulls up. Like, the website pulls up. Like, you know, 13 years ago, it was like, oh, I just was dumb enough to think you put up a website, the phone's going to ring. Like, people are going to find you. You know, and that's just not, it's just not the case at all. You gotta work at it. You know what I mean? So, I mean, it's just little lessons like that where, and there's so many more tools today. You know, from, you know, social media was really just getting going. But today, seeing how you can, market a product on Instagram or Facebook, and you can run, you know, obviously you can run Google ads back then, but, you know, running ads on there to attract people to your product or service. I mean, just simply wasn't, it was still kind of old school of, I mean, I remember us running ads in different publications and just things like that, man, I wish I had some of that money back that we spent. Yeah, there's a lot of truth to if I knew then what I know now.
Right. Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, I'm sure, and especially the notion of, and people, you know, watching this today who are maybe a little bit younger than you and I, but you know, knocking on doors, what is that, right? Or picking up the phone call, you know, what is that? A lot of this stuff today is, you know, very much, you know, online, LinkedIn, social media, things like that. But to be quite honest, I mean, let's leverage that as much as possible. But I think that what you guys did before, right, coming back and having the assumption, hey, I knocked on doors, I gave people information, there had to have been at least some phone calls or some interest, right? And then realizing it's not just that, you got to do more. You wasted a little bit money, you kind of, but let's not actually, I almost don't even think wasting money what is the actual appropriate verbiage, right? I mean, it cost you to learn.
That's right. It was just an investment. You know, it was instead of going to get my MBA, you know, this was probably more expensive, but but well worth. I mean, I don't even hand out, you know, talk about marketing. I don't even hand out business cards anymore.
Really?
And that was like a big thing. Like, hand out a flyer, give a business card, get a business card, write the front desk person's name down, go back, put it in an Excel sheet, follow up with an email. Like, something, it was basic, fundamental blocking and tackling type of stuff.
Right.
That we were doing in you know, 2007, 8, 9, 10. Yeah. So those are some of the things that I remember.
There's some other things that you have purposely blocked out of your memory.
Yeah. Thanks for this conversation.
Listen,
I have heartburn.
I'm already getting agitated myself from thinking about what you're going through, what I've gone through, and what I still have to go through. So
right. And now we're in unprecedented times. You know,
yeah.
This is something that, you know, we've been talking to our employees about going back a year, 18 months ago, saying, hey, there's going to be another recession. You know, I'm an economics major. There's going to be a market correction. There's going to be a market correction. I mean, I was wrong and how it happened. You know, I thought it was going to be a student loan bubble, you know, so it was preparing the team for a conversation and a dialogue of how to navigate, you know, through a recession-based conversation. But this is something that never in my wildest dreams I would have predicted or imagined.
So that's actually a really good segue into one is just kind of wrapping up saying, listen, you know, clearly education is great, wonderful, and, you know, looking at economics, but then you realize it's actually like OJT, just on the job training, doing things And it's taking those past experiences and then saying, okay, how can I apply it today, right? So you went from, helping out from a lending perspective to then just auditing, and then now strictly, refined and focused. So with all of that experience, right, and kind of where you guys are at today, clearly there's a lot of knowledge out there, whatever. So what is like Access Group doing right now with, and you guys, or you personally as well, as, supporting the small business community out there? I mean, I've seen you post some things out there, and I know that you're definitely an advocate for that. So what are you guys doing to help out?
Yeah. So, we did go back to our roots a little bit, and kind of dug back into the bag of tricks, if you will, and started leveraging a lot of those financial contacts. The SBA kind of rules and regulations and what's required for underwriting a loan has been pretty much the same type of documents since forever. So when all of this started to happen, we started reaching out to our contacts and resources to learn more about the PPP loan, the EDIL, and the different things that would be required. And then just not only reach out to our clients, but different peers that we have that own businesses, trying to get people connected directly with banks that we knew had money, that were being aggressive on how they were looking at files with respect to the PPP loan, and how they're communicating and treating clients. We started a kind of a resource page on Facebook. We started a Facebook group where, open basically strictly to business owners, so that community could share intel of what was going on, because there's just, there was so much stuff that was unknown. And with that PPP loan, stuff was changing. Like, people were literally waiting to submit, that Friday morning, and things changed Thursday night at midnight, and it was just a completely wild, chaotic moment in history. And we just tried to do our little part by letting friends and family and loved ones know what they could do to, procure funding to hopefully save and sustain their business through this downturn.
Yeah, I think that's actually pretty awesome. So I think essentially, again, you guys taking your experience, your contacts, and instead of hoarding it for yourselves, right, you're saying, hey, listen, now we want to tap into you guys to help out everybody else as well, right? Like, as you guys are still continuing to run the organization Access Group, right, and the subsidiaries and stuff that you guys have underneath it, right, then but knowing that the fact is that the community needs that help, but trying to decipher all the information, I think is speaks volumes of you guys.
Well, because there's two types of people in a time like this. There's people that are paralyzed and they just don't know what to do. And then there's the ones that, take action. And, being that we had already been through a recession and had been paralyzed once before, because that slapped us in the face, the 2008 recession. I mean, just didn't know what to do, especially being a year old in business. So we really tried to leverage that experience and applied it to as many friends that we could to get them in front of the right folks to help them out.
Man, I love that message. It's actually a big message out there, right? So it's either take action or freeze, right? And I think it's kind of like either push forward to continue to live, or essentially stay stagnant and for lack of better terminology, you're just, at that point you're dying, right? Or your business is going completely backwards, right? So I think it's just, even that mentality is essentially where innovation comes from, right? And I think that's what you guys did. Innovation just isn't technology, it's process, right? It's, adaptation. It's being able to say, okay, listen, there's a problem that we were looking to solve. It's not that big of a problem now, or other people have got it. So let's solve this other problem. And it seems like you guys have done that multiple times, right? Not only with your organization, but now helping out the small business community. So with that said, though, you're out there, you're helping people out, you're essentially putting all this information together to present to everybody. What do you think, though? Because we're eventually going to get over this, right? And there's I think a couple of things. One is, I think there are some things that have yet to be seen, right? So we don't know what the aftermath is really going to bring, right? So when you were saying that there's that bubble for student loans and things like that, I think there are a lot of things below the surface of this issue, of this pandemic, that essentially other things are going to start popping. However, for businesses that are out there, right, small businesses, we've got the information, they're getting over the hump. What do you think the new normal is going to look like? Because I don't think we're going to go back to the way things were before in certain respects. I think that we're kind of dying for some normalcy.
Yeah.
But I also think that there's definitely going to be some change. So what do you think that looks like?
So I did hear an interesting term from our HR person.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a company called HR Shield that provides phone and email support, on demand. And one of the terminologies used on one of their calls was the next normal instead of the new normal. It's the next normal.
I like that.
I think I've never been an advocate of remote work.
Okay.
But remote workers, if you will.
Right.
But I think that is something that we all will embrace even more so than ever before, because it's just been proven over the last 8 weeks that business can still get done. Mm-hmm. I think you'll see more of a life balance type of atmosphere within a lot of workplaces, including our own. So I think those are some of the little changes that we'll see. But I don't think we've seen from an economic standpoint, I don't think we've seen the worst of this yet. I think it's too early. The PPP loan, with that being 8 weeks, I think hopefully there's conversations, I think, happening right now within Congress to loosen up on that condition or requirement. Mm-hmm. I think that would be paramount, and extending the life of some of these businesses, because unfortunately for some, the money came too late.
Yep.
So we haven't seen the full fallout yet to really know what is, going to happen. And we don't know how many, people will come back on board at these restaurants and hospitality groups, and think of all the major retail stores in malls, and all these people need to be rehired. And unfortunately, right now, this is a real problem that we're answering for business owners with HR Shield. Is they have employees that are collecting unemployment, mm-hmm. and they're now making, and maybe they're collecting disability or some other supplemental form of income. They're now making more money, mm-hmm. subsidized, than they are being employed, and they don't want to come back to being employed. So now the business owner is faced with, well, they don't want to come back to work. They were a good worker. Do I hire them back later? I need to hire someone in order to meet the minimum requirement for this loan to be forgiven. Mm-hmm. So you have a whole new problem arising that the SBA doesn't even have answers for yet, because they don't even know how they're going to forgive the loan. They don't even know what is going to be required. I was talking to our banker yesterday. It's TBD. We're 4 weeks in. We're fortunate we got the PPP loan. We're 4 weeks in, and it's TBD on what is going to be required to forgive it.
Yeah.
How can you do that?
Yeah. It is amazing. I know that a lot of people are out there. So immediately our reaction is we need to hurry up and just kind of give a lifeline that's out there, right? And you could even see it as they were, the money was out there, and these conglomerate organizations were sucking up this money, right? Mm-hmm. and not giving it to or allowing for the smaller companies who desperately need it, right? To get it, especially non-public companies, right? That that they have means for other they have means to obtain resources elsewhere, right? So it's just, to your point, I think TBD is like the perfect explanation of it. Like, so what next? TBD. We have no stinking idea.
I think we'll see a new definition for small employer, because currently the SBA defines it at 500 employees on down.
Yep.
When there's 27 million companies that are 20 employees and less.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's 30 million small businesses. So the majority is far less than the that 20 to 500
right.
range.
Yep.
So I think we're going to see some new definitions on that. And I wouldn't be surprised too if we see more guidelines or stricter guidelines with respect to 1099 subcontractor type of personnel. That's just my hypothesis. I have no data to back that up.
Right.
Just based on kind of going through that PPP loan process and how at the last minute they changed their mind that subcontractors wouldn't count as being part of your payroll and that they had to apply on their own. It created a whole new dynamic, and I think we'll see a shift there as employers realize, well, they thought they were beating the system by not paying FICA and FUTA and SUTA. Now they just missed out on funding because where they thought they were cheating the system, now they're losing. So I think there's going to be different types of conversations that are going to be had at that employer, employee, contractor level of, no, you're actually going to be an employee now. I'm not going to put myself in that position. And yeah, I recognize you're going to take home less, but there's 30 million unemployed people. Right now, the bench is pretty deep with qualified people that will gladly do what you won't do right now.
So that brings me kind of to my last point, and I want to get your perspective on it, and then, we can wrap it up, even though, to be quite honest, you hit on a ton of things that I'd love to have a long conversation on. So what we'll do is we'll have you back again, hopefully, if you graciously
or
agree.
I'll just come up to your place. We'll social distance. We'll have a bourbon cigar. And
listen, actually, I am 100% fiending for a cigar, so I have one left that I've been like.
I know you're a cigar man. I've been to one of those, a couple of those outings that you had back.
Yep. Although I think moving forward we'll have to do it in like multiple locations, because I think the whole social distancing thing has now, like, just for those who are not here of the Tampa Bay area, if you live in South Tampa, you stay in South Tampa. You go beyond,
guilty. I'm guilty.
Yeah, you go beyond, and you did me a big favor by, you were like, hey man, I'm crossing that street, so this is just for you, buddy. But it was a good time. But I think that moving forward, I'll probably have like an event in South Tampa,
right,
North Tampa, and then kind of where I live, which is Pasco County, which nobody ever visits except the people that live here. But I guess the to gain your perspective is, I think you're right. I think that there's I love that phrase, next normal. But to your point, we have a ton of people who are unemployed. I think that there's going to be a lot of shifting going on. People who were maybe in one industry are realizing that it's time for them to kind of jump ship or move into another industry and figure out how they're going to do it. I'm seeing even schools and stuff like that, like even schools are coming out certificates and things like that, or providing opportunities for people to get some sort of technical training so they can move into another industry. I think other employers are going to essentially kind of not wait for the government to change their standards, because they're needing people to come to bring back. So to your point, if that individual doesn't want to come back to work but somebody else does, right, they may now look at that individual and say, do you just have the aptitude? We'll train you, right? And but I also think that companies are going to start shifting as well. So you had brought up before that you weren't necessarily a fan of remote work. And I think that you and I have come from the mindset before is that there's nothing that replaces that there's nothing that replaces that interaction, face to face, right? You can see someone's gesture, you can get to know who they are, you can joke around with them, blah, blah, blah. I think though that you're right, that there's that shift now that we have to accept it. A lot of people want it, and that they can actually be pretty successful in doing so, but they may actually make some certain changes and things like that. But I guess the direct question for you is, how much of a shift do you think is going to, or how much of these changes do you think is really going to occur? I mean, from my perspective, I think it's going to be a little bit chaos for a period of time for people to kind of get their footing, right? But how much of these different shifts do you think is really going to be out there for employers and employees, again, making changes and pivoting?
Well, I think long
Probably
term,
a pretty broad question too.
yeah, but long term, I think that the shift is going to be massive. From this regard, you're going to have more employers look to leverage AI to replace the workforce. And it's already happening. We created our own AI with it built on Alexa, to where you can ask Alexa pretty much any standard HR question. We've got several hundred questions programmed, and that's free. So I think you will see, as businesses pull out of this, and ones that have the economic resources, that they'll look even harder at how to systemize their business leveraging AI, because if the person can't be there to have that face-to-face interaction, to have that, and a lot of times in business, there's an immediate need. Like sometimes you need something, you need it right now. And if you call that person's extension, or, they're working on something else or whatever have you, they're not accessible, and you can't walk to their office to see them to inquire about handling a particular issue, business owners will look for other ways to solve the problem. Mm-hmm. That's just my opinion. But I do think that not immediately, because there's too many other distractions. Mm-hmm. But this is really laying the foundation for heavier investment on that type of infrastructure and that type of technology.
So a lot more automation. So we're going to look at, and actually I do agree. I think that people are going to look at what can they do, because I think what will happen is they'll essentially look at, one is, we need to be much more prepared for a situation like this, where we can kind of hoard a little bit more cash or have access to funding, right? And what's the first thing you do is either try to look at where can you cut expenses, but then you start looking at those. And I do think that we need to look at how can we more efficiently generate revenue respective to our business, but then also is where can we automate the process so that we spend the money up front and then move on.
And look, everyone's on blast, even us, and even our PEO vendors. I promise you, there will come a point in time when an HR person or a payroll person or the business owner goes, "Hey Alexa, run my payroll. Do you have any changes this month?" Yes. Bonus Omar, $5,000. Any other changes? No. Payroll is complete. I didn't have to push a button. I didn't have to send an email. I didn't have to do a thing. It will happen. It absolutely will happen. Everything's going to be going to voice. So that's how I see it. And I can see it in my own industry, and I don't even know if they see it yet, but it's going to happen. We're already
100%
doing it with
agree.
HR.
Yeah, I mean, you just said it, right? So you have now your own AI within, built in with an Alexa. You can ask these questions that a lot of people are seeking answers to. You're providing that solution. They're coming back to you now for whatever it is that they can't do, automated, or you guys actually create the automation for them, and it's a plug and play for them as well. So I think that's very,
I haven't
very
figured out
well
how to
put.
monetize that yet.
Well, I'm pretty sure you will.
But
And
Alexa Shield, it's free. It's HR Shield, it's free. So they can ask. Anyone can ask any HR question they want, and if it doesn't know the answer, we get notified and we program it, and then it's in there the next day.
that's awesome, man.
So,
well, you guys are already
crazy stuff.
doing a lot of things that are, yeah. And I think that you guys are doing a lot of things that are automated and or innovative already. So I'm actually really enjoyed this conversation, man. But just real quickly, I'm gonna post it on there. But is there a quick way that people can is there a quick way that people can actually contact you guys?
Yeah. Do you want me to give my email or?
Whatever is the quickest way to I'm going to post the information on there, but whatever you feel like the quickest ways to get in touch with you. So if it's your website or
they can
email
us or email me at patrick@axis group.llc.com. And that's a quick way to connect. And then obviously you can follow us on all social media platforms, which is WorkComp MGA on Instagram, and Axis Group MGA on Facebook. We're Axis Group on YouTube. So we've got all those fun things out there. So yeah, happy to connect. Love having conversations and like this. So appreciate the opportunity to be a part of what you're building, and looking forward to working with you and your team on some deals, and so you guys can help our clients with respect to saving on costs of healthcare.
Yeah, man.
Because that's a whole nother hour-long conversation. That's a whole nother hour-long conversation for sure of how maybe we'll flip the script. I'll interview you about how you can save on the cost of healthcare, because it's out of control.
I would very much welcome that conversation, because a lot of people need to hear that. And I think that the good news is I think our company's positioned well to be able to answer that call for a lot of employers. But we can definitely have that conversation. I'll welcome that any day. But man, again, Patrick, thanks so much for joining me. Yeah, man. And I appreciate everything that you're doing in the small business community. So for everybody else out there, thank you so much for joining us on this other episode of AHB TV, and we'll catch you on the other side.